Imagine marching into a country so vast that 600,000 men, the largest army ever assembled in human history, could simply disappear into its frozen emptiness like snowflakes into an ocean. June 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte led his Grande Armée into Russia, expecting a quick 6-week campaign ending in Moscow. 6 months later, only 22,000 frostbitten, starving, traumatized survivors stumbled back across the Niemen River. This wasn't just military defeat, this was the complete annihilation of an empire's invincibility, a 96% casualty rate worse than any modern war, worse than Stalingrad, worse than the Somme. Think about those numbers that still shock historians. 578,000 men died not primarily from battle, but from starvation, disease, and cold, so extreme that flesh froze in minutes and breath crystallized in lungs. The fate of 80 million European subjects hung in the balance as the world's greatest military genius walked into history's deadliest trap. But here's what makes this catastrophe truly insane. Napoleon's own marshals warned him 3 separate times to stop. 7 different intelligence reports predicted exactly what would happen down to the month his army would die. And he ignored them all because genius had blinded itself with hubris. How does the world's best supplied army starve to death in a country of farmland? Why did Napoleon stay in burning Moscow for 35 fatal days when every instinct screamed retreat? 1 man died every 3 yards of the 1,000-mile retreat, frozen corpses marking the path like grotesque milestones. This is how geography, climate, and scorched earth destroyed what battles never could. In 1811, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the absolute pinnacle of human power as master of 80 million subjects. His empire stretched from the Atlantic coast to the Polish frontier, a domain larger than Charlemagne's, rivaling Rome's at its height. Kings waited in his antechambers like supplicants. Princes married his sisters for political advantage. The man who'd risen from Corsican obscurity now dictated terms to ancient dynasties. But here's what made the situation explosive. His own ally was systematically betraying him. Tsar Alexander I of Russia, once Napoleon's greatest admirer at their famous meeting at Tilsit in 1807, had turned enemy. These 2 emperors had divided Europe between them on a raft in the middle of a river, calling each other brother. Alexander wore a medallion with Napoleon's portrait. By 1811, that brotherhood had curdled into deadly rivalry. The continental system, Napoleon's economic blockade designed to strangle Britain, was bankrupting Russia. English goods were Russian nobility's lifeblood. Smuggled British coffee, textiles, and manufactured goods flooded through Russian ports with the Tsar's quiet approval. Russian nobles, watching their fortunes evaporate under the blockade, whispered of palace coups. Alexander faced an impossible choice: economic collapse or break with Napoleon. Then came 3 warnings in late 1811 that should have stopped everything. First, Napoleon's ambassador in St. Petersburg traveled personally to Paris. "Sire, the Russians will retreat forever. They will burn their own empire. You will find nothing but ashes and ice." Second, Marshal David, the Iron Marshal, who'd never lost a battle, studied the logistics with mathematical precision. "We cannot feed 600,000 men across 600 miles of wilderness. The army will devour itself." Third came a Polish princess who knew Russia intimately. "Your Majesty doesn't understand. Russian winter isn't weather, it's a weapon." But Napoleon had made a fatal miscalculation based on all his previous victories. He believed one massive battle would bring Alexander to terms, just like Austerlitz, just like Jena, just like Wagram. Quick war, decisive victory, dictated peace. It had always worked before in his brilliant career. Why would Russia be different? The Grande Armée of 1812 defied human comprehension in its scale and diversity. 600,000 men speaking 12 different languages: French, Italian, Polish, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Swiss, Croatian, even Mamluk Egyptian cavalry from Egypt. This wasn't just an army, it was Europe itself on the march. Consider the logistics that should have warned Napoleon. 150,000 horses consumed 6,000 tons of fodder every single day. 25,000 supply wagons stretched in columns 50 miles long. Each regiment needed 900 tons of flour monthly. The mathematics alone screamed impossibility. Here's the detail that changes everything. This magnificent army was already dying before it crossed the Russian frontier. The supply wagons built for smooth French roads shattered on polished tracks. Horses bred for European meadows collapsed in sandy wasteland. Food rotted in unexpected June heat, reaching 95 degrees Fahrenheit. On the 24th of June, 1812, as 600,000 boots thundered across the Niemen River, death was already waiting. The first week brought ominous signs. Villages abandoned so recently that fires still smoldered, grain stores emptied, wells poisoned with animal carcasses. The Russians weren't just retreating, they were erasing civilization in front of the French advance. General Barclay de Tolly had planned the unthinkable: strategic withdrawal on a continental scale, scorched-earth warfare that meant burning their own cities, destroying their own crops. When courtiers protested, he answered coldly, "Better our fire than French bread." This decision would cost 100,000 Russian civilian lives, but save their nation. In that first week, without seeing a single enemy soldier, the Grande Armée lost 10,000 horses to the Lithuanian sand. Unexpected June heat reaching 95 degrees Fahrenheit and lack of water. Cavalry units reported mounts collapsing mid-stride. Artillery horses died in their traces still harnessed. Each day's march in extreme heat cost 5,000 men to exhaustion, disease, and desertion. No battles, just arithmetic, grinding down the greatest army ever assembled. Supply wagons built for European roads shattered every 3 miles on Russian tracks. Replacement wheels didn't fit, Russian axles designed differently. Food meant for human consumption went to keep remaining horses alive. This is when heroes became animals fighting for survival. Elite guardsmen fought over muddy water. Officers hoarded private supplies while their men starved. The brotherhood of arms that made Napoleon's forces invincible dissolved into Darwinian survival. The heat apocalypse intensified beyond comprehension. Thermometers recorded 135 degrees Fahrenheit in direct sun. Men drank horse urine mixed with gunpowder, an old soldier's trick to make it palatable. Units reported soldiers stripping naked on march, driven mad by heat and thirst. Military hospitals, overwhelmed before any battle, simply abandoned those who couldn't walk. The supply system collapsed catastrophically. Napoleon's innovative logistics, vivre sur le pays, living off conquered land, failed because Russian scorched earth left nothing. 400-mile supply lines from Poland, harassed nightly by Cossack raiders, delivered a trickle. Armies that required 900 tons of flour daily received 100. Elite units suffered worst. The Imperial Guard, Napoleon's pampered veterans accustomed to best supplies, couldn't adapt to starvation. Line regiments used to hardship maintained discipline longer. August arrived with no relief from heat or starvation. Smolensk, the ancient fortress city that was supposed to provide everything, food, shelter, decisive battle, offered only more ashes. Then came Borodino on the 7th of September 1812, the day 70,000 men would fall in 12 hours of concentrated murder. Dawn revealed 250,000 men packed into 3 square miles, the greatest concentration of military power Earth had ever seen. The opening bombardment began at 6 a.m., 1,000 cannons firing simultaneously. The earth shook 10 miles away. Witnesses reported the sound as God tearing the sky apart, windows shattered in villages beyond the horizon. This wasn't warfare, it was industrial slaughter. The Great Redoubt, a massive earthwork fortification, became the focal point of hell. 7 separate French assaults crashed against its walls, bodies stacked 8 feet high. Men climbed corpses of their comrades to reach Russian guns. Here's the detail that changes everything. 1 cannonball killed 42 men standing in a single line. The compression of forces meant death multiplied geometrically. Entire regiments evaporated in minutes. The 57th Line Regiment charged with 1,800 men and returned with 200. Prince Bagration, the fiery Georgian leading the Russian left, took grapeshot to the leg. As he fell mortally wounded, his final words, "The battle is not lost," became a battle cry. At battle's climax, with Russians wavering, Napoleon's marshals begged, "Send in the Imperial Guard for the killing blow." These elite veterans could shatter the exhausted Russian center. Victory hung on one order. Napoleon hesitated with words that revealed hidden doubt. "And if there is another battle tomorrow, what shall I fight it with?" The moment passed. Russia survived. By sunset, 70,000 casualties littered the field. That's 97 men killed or wounded every single minute for 12 consecutive hours. Borodino village changed hands 8 times.